Hello and welcome to the Project Hope podcast for families and friends with a loved one in a group of high demand, high control. I am your host, Jennifer. A lot has changed since I first started this podcast, so I thought I'd add a little to the initial introductions and provide something that's more up to date. I work with survivors of coercive control one-to-one. I also consult with families, and I offer education to the public around such topics. For the full scope of what I offer and also my credentials, you're welcome to check out my website, jennifer-french.com. I have a master's in the psychology of coercive control, and as of August 2024, I've been accepted into a PhD program called Psychology, Policy, and Law, and I'll have a specialty in either criminal behavior or forensic victimology. This will support the work that I currently do as an expert witness in cases involving coercive control. The Project Hope podcast has provided such an amazing opportunity for me to meet many wonderful people, survivors, experts, family members, and it's truly a pleasure to meet each one of these individuals you will hear from. This podcast will conclude with season 2 as I enter into my PhD program, but I have many other exciting things on the horizon, so please stay in touch and go to my website for any and all current events. Thanks to all of you who listen to Project Hope and care about this community. For those of you who haven't heard the first Project Hope podcast interview with Gonzalez, I'll do a short review of her history and credentials. She is the daughter of Cuban immigrants and was raised in Miami, but currently lives with her family in the Pacific Northwest. Her career has taken her from social worker to midwife to her current role as a registered nurse and grief revolutionary. After experiencing personal losses ranging from the deaths of dear friends, family members, relationships, experiences, and more, she has used her over 20 years in the medical field to develop courses and rituals that help integrate loss into life. Madi is passionate about breaking down the social barriers around grief and the stigma attached to it. Over the last 2 decades, she has had the privilege of ushering hundreds through the passage of life and death. Madi is co-founder, curator, and editor of the Grief Rites Foundation, where art is used as agency to live boldly with grief. By curating monthly readings, publishing articles, and facilitating workshops, Grief Rites creates the space for grief stories to be witnessed. And between our last time together and present day, Madi actually has a beta course called Reconnecting with Yourself After a Major Loss that's being offered for free in exchange for your feedback and testimonials. So if you'd like to be a part of that, it launches May 22nd, and we're in 2021. And any and all of this information can be found in the podcast episode notes. Also, if you're listening beyond this date, we provide Madi's email so that you can get in touch with her about the full rollout of the program if you're interested. Thanks so much. Welcome back, Maria Alicia Gonzalez. Of course, it is a pleasure again to have you back with us on the Project Hope podcast.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's really a joy to be back here with you.
So we last left off when you had driven away from the order house for your final time. You had driven to a Target, you were in the parking lot, you wrote your family to announce that you had left. And so I'd like to pick up there to continue the story, but perhaps you can also set the stage for our audience and just give us a little bit about the structure of your family of origin as you share with us the reaction of your family.
Okay, thanks. All right. So my family of origin, I'm one of 6 children. I'm the youngest of 6, and we have a really wide, very interconnected family. My parents are immigrants to this country, and they moved here with my three oldest siblings before I was born. And they're Cuban, so Spanish is our first language. And I have a lot of nephews and nieces that, because I was the youngest, there's actually 18 years between my oldest brother and myself.
Oh, wow.
So he actually was married when I was only 6 years old. And and my next oldest brother was married when I was 7 years old, and my next sister was married when I was like 12 years old. So my nephews and nieces, a lot of them are closer in age with me than I am with their parents, who are my siblings, So we ended up, and my parents, in particular, my mother was like a very big, but my parents were just very involved in my nephews and nieces' lives, fortunately, and they were really grateful for that. So we had them around a lot, and we would get to visit with them, and so and I also grew up, we moved to Miami when I was 8. And I had a lot of community there, a lot of family community there, because Miami at that time in the early 80s became a place, a hub where a lot of Cuban immigrants were coming and had already gotten there. So anyway, so there was a lot of that kind of connection. Um, yeah, I grew up, one of many. um and we all stood out in our own ways, but I was definitely somebody who saw my family with frequency before the order, did family holidays all the time, you know um talked to my parents quite a bit. Like, I used to talk to my mother a lot. I mean, for me, it seemed like a lot when it was like at least a few times a week, or more. And, they would always come visit me in the places, I went into the order when I was 28, 29. And, my parents would always like come visit wherever I lived. I mean, we had that kind of a relationship of connection, of love, of, um, desiring to be in each other's lives, you
Yeah.
know? And like, nurturing that.
Nice.
So in those last couple of weeks, when I was, sort of had given it another shot to go, like, okay, am I gonna stay, am I not? I had actually told one sister when I did the initial leave. I had texted or emailed or whatever my sister who lives where I live now, asking her whether I could come, here. And she had said yes. And then when I was in that in between back and forth, I informed her of that, but just I hadn't talked to anybody else in my family. And actually, I don't even know to this day whether she told me. I'm just realizing that as I'm telling you. I'm like, oh, I don't even know whether she told my family
Yeah.
that I had left
Yeah.
or not. I don't actually know. I'm gonna have to ask her about that. Um, but
But I assume your assumption was that this letter that you had written announcing kind of your
well,
leaving was
this was
probably the
different.
first time that
This was
people were
different. Yeah.
really
No,
hearing
so
about
I purposefully did not start talking to the rest of I was in, the rest of my family when I was in that process. And the reason is that, I mean, I was under so much emotional and mental anguish and pressure. And I knew people would have a lot of questions, right? And I didn't know the answers to, I was just fighting for my life. I was like fighting for my mental stability and my emotional wellness. And I knew that they would have questions, as they should, right? Like valid questions, but I didn't know how I would be able to answer them.
Yeah.
Um, I'm actually remembering this thing, which I haven't thought of in a very long time. And it's, I reached out. It was like right as I was exiting Chicago, or maybe, I don't know the timing, but I reached out and I asked my dad for some money,
Mm.
and he didn't know exactly what it was for. And he sent me a check. And it actually arrived that morning that I drove back to the Chicago Center from my 3-day, retreat, quote retreat, and had made that decision to pack everything up. I remember going over to the mail slots and just being like, please, God, please, God, please, God. Like I needed that money to, I was like, whatever, if I don't have that money, I'm just going to put on a credit card and I will work it and I will make it happen. And I'm just like right now, as I'm telling you this, I haven't thought of this in so long, but I'm totally like remembering being there in the like foyer of the house and like going to the mail slot and seeing my dad's writing and just being like, oh, thank you, God. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And just going to the bank and putting it in and just like, yeah. And so then the reason I went to Target was because in the hours that I was moving all of the furniture or all my stuff and all my things, I sweat through all my clothes that I was wearing. And I went to just buy like, a clean shirt and whatever. And like, then went into the bathroom there and changed. And I had like an 8-hour drive ahead of me after that. And I also had a thing to return. It's so weird, right? It's so weird.
What one does when in shock.
I had a shower caddy that nobody wanted. I was like, I'm returning that shower caddy. So I returned it and I got some clothes. And I sat in the what's it called? The parking lot. And I emailed them, my family, my brothers and sisters. And I don't remember, probably some of my sister-in-laws, but I don't remember, but my parents for sure and my siblings. And I remember saying like, I'm okay, I'm safe. And again, I'm like, God, I wish I would have looked for that letter. And I remember my dad's response that he said that he felt that my mom and he felt sad that I was making this trip alone. And that was really kind,
Yeah.
Because I was and I wasn't, right? But and so, in that note, I also revealed to them, that I was heading where I was going to Oregon and yeah, I just drove and drove and drove. I drove west. And my family's responses, I don't even really remember other people's responses that well, like the initial responses,
but it did elicit some action from your oldest brother.
Yeah, I mean, people were in shock, right? I mean, I'd been there for 14 years. I was super devoted. I had the few times I had traveled, I was always serving. I mean, since I was a deacon, even living in Boston, and my sister who lives in Western Mass, like I would be like setting up my altar in her teenage son's room and like serving communion sometimes to my nephews. And like, you know what I mean? Like showed up at my nephew's high school graduation party and my clerics. And like, I was like, I was in. Yeah. My oldest brother, he called me every day. I mean, he called me every single day that I was on the road. And he asked me like where I was and where I was going. And I remember him doing stuff like looking at just like the map and being like, oh, you're going to this town. Oh, that town's really beautiful. And there's this and this. And I remember him being like, you're on a road trip. Like our favorite band is Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yeah.
It's like the most beautiful music on the planet, one of the most beautiful musics on the planet. And that brother, his name's Orlando, and he introduced me to that music when I was a child. And so it's one of those musics, it's like in my blood, it's in my soul and heart, like, cause I just grew up with it and it's so joyful. And I remember him being like, you're on a road trip, like, listen to, are you listening to Earth, Wind and Fire? And I was like, no, I'm just trying to like breathe. I was like, I don't really feel like I'm on a road trip. I was feeling like I'm on I
The
don't know what
Great
I,
Escape.
yeah, I was like, I don't know, um, but that was so vital to me.
Yeah.
And the reason, it's like I think we talked about last time, and I definitely know you have talked about it with a lot of people who you've interviewed, is that the contrast of being needed and loved and having people communicate with you and ask of you questions all day, every day, to nothing.
Yeah.
And it's, it was just nothing. There wasn't one call. Like he was the only person calling me, I mean, and again, like some of my other siblings like reached out to like, what's going on, and
But the consistency.
yeah, I mean, he just was like right in there, right? And he just was like, and that it just really helped me to feel like a thread as I was getting farther away and closer to our sister, and then they actually visited right away. They were already planning a visit
Oh,
out there.
nice.
And so then I got to see them less than a month later, like within a few weeks, I got to see him and my sister-in-law who, I adore, and we have a lot of love between us. And then I was at my sister's here, and that was, like to just be received, was really powerful because I had, the sister that I came and stayed with here, she had mourned my death. Like she grieved me as though I had died, like for real, like
Yeah.
for real. And
Wow.
it's taken a lot of years of repair and I wouldn't even say it's repair. To me, the word reconstruction comes to my mind
Yeah.
because it's not something of going back
Yes.
to it's like a new construction
Yeah.
of a relationship that was lifelong, that was very connected, and then that was abandoned by me.
Yeah.
And so, I always feel like my family, I was prepared to have my family say no. My family just, no, I wasn't prepared because I don't know how you could prepare yourself for that, but I was open to the possibility,
Right.
right? Because I just don't know. And, you know, the fact that they were receptive, they were open, they were loving, they were supportive, and they continue to be through the many journeys that the last 7.5 years have been, is a life raft. And just the connections. I mean, I have some like extended family also, that one of my cousins who is a psychologist, and she sent me some amazing books to read right away. And, when I reached back into books that I had read in my life before of Pema Chodron and like When Things Fall Apart, and, just going back. And again, it's not really going back, right? It's like, but it's such a shock I was 43, I was like, I had entered when I was 28, like to re-enter the world, to not have a role anymore, to
Yeah.
not be, walking. I always felt like a billboard for God.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. To be available for people
Yeah.
in this way, and to be so obvious because I'm wearing clerics, or I'm wearing, then I was walking around in purple robes,
Right.
like for real, like like for real, going to the
I forgot that you
supermarket.
had that element.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
totally
Yeah,
like
and just for our listeners, we as priests, we wore clerics, so we were all wearing the collar and cross all the time, at any time, other than maybe if you
yeah,
had
when I
a
was
job in the
working.
world.
Right. Yeah.
And then when Madi became a teacher, she was to wear the purple robes that were silk gowns, basically, that the Peter and Claire both wore.
Yeah.
And Maddie was the second or the third person
Yeah.
to do that in our order. I am delighted to offer you Pure Haven products. All proceeds received go right back to the Project Hope podcast. I myself have been using these pure, safe, and toxin-free products for over 4 years, and I absolutely love knowing that my home has countertops that my little niece and nephew can eat off of without worrying that they have a handful of chemicals being placed in their mouths. The cleaning products are some of my favorites. The glass and surface cleaners smell amazing as well. So if this is of interest to you, please go to purehaven.com/Jennifer French. The link is also included below with information about this podcast segment.
Yeah. So I want to backtrack for a moment and just say that, so when I left and I drove, my first stop was in Omaha, Nebraska, where I had actually lived for 6 years because I'd gone to school there. And I actually don't even remember reaching out to this friend, but she is one of my best friends from college. She actually is the person that was with me when I gave birth to my daughter. Like, she came out and lived with me for 2 weeks, so she could be present with us. And I will never forget arriving. I mean, I arrived so late in Omaha that first night. I stayed like in a hotel, but then the next morning I went to her house, and I remember the screen was punched out, like cut out or something of their door. And I pulled up at their door, and I just remember, I mean, this was a friend who I had not seen for over a decade. And just a friend, another person just like my family. And these were like I was with her at the birth of her second son, now 21 or 22 years ago. And she walked through the door. Like, she saw me, she walked through the door, and we just held each other and just wept. Like when I go, the immense lie, right? That both orders, now there's two, but the orders lie is that we don't have people outside, that they cut us off, and they remind us every day that we don't have anything outside of the order, that this is the whole thing. This is all we need. And meanwhile, while I was cutting off that, right, these people who remained loving me. I mean, I loved them too. It wasn't like I cut the love. I definitely did it because I loved and missed them, right? Yeah. But they kept it going too. And that piece is so humbling, right? It's so intense and it's so true. It's like true love. So I just want to share that. Like, yeah, my friend Jen, as I have a lot of lovely Jens in my life, she like walked through the door to just like embrace me. And they were just like, you're here. Hallelujah. And then, yeah, it was a long road from Chicago all the way to Oregon. So it was a long journey and staying at very different places along the way. And then, yeah, arriving at my sister's, and yeah, I'll sort of never forget that too. Just sort of arriving, and I had to go run, whatever, sort of do things, and then come and be there and land and just be kind of in shock for a long time. Yeah. And I stayed with her for 6 weeks. And during those 6 weeks, I, found a job and an apartment because, it was like how we were, right? You had to like land, you had to just like get to work. You had to get to work. And, people were recommending that I kind of relax a little bit, but that wasn't the training that I had for my life, in my adult life, right? It was like, is when you landed somewhere, you had to just work.
You execute.
You have to execute immediately. And so I did, and I was good with that, right? I knew how to do that. I mean, and I'm a nurse, so I could get a job, and yeah. And I found a place to live, and moved after 6 weeks of staying at my sister's, and And that was another massive shock to live. I had lived in intimate community for 14 years, or at that point, maybe it was 13 or whatever, a long time
Yeah.
with a purpose. I had no furniture. I had like, it was pretty freaking depressing. Like I was just like, I remember, well, the same brother, my oldest brother, my mother, let me pick of some household items that I would like from her kitchen. And
Mm.
then they mailed that to me so I could have some household items, like that were from my mom. And,
Oh,
it was just sort of these weird things of like truly yeah, not having, having the most important thing, which was my life. I mean, but not having things, not having a
right.
bed, not having like a table, not having things to eat with. Like it's just sort of this very basic, but
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
was interesting.
Yeah. So then share with us kind of the next significant
Mhm.
event that happened.
Well, the next significant thing that happened was that my mom died 6 months later.
Yeah.
And so my mom was already diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she had been in and out of sort of recovery, and then, yeah, that following April. So actually, we're coming up on 7 years, coming
Wow.
up on 7 years this April. And yeah, so my mother died, and she gave me the grace of getting to be with her as
Yeah.
she died. And, I say that because I was, in Brazil at my niece's wedding. And I'll never forget what my sister, who stayed back from the wedding, said to me, Mari, you're not going to want to miss this. Like, there's like, we're praying and we're singing. And then she's also flowing in and out of consciousness. And by the grace of God and the kindness of my brother, and like I got on a plane and I landed at 5:30 that morning, and she died at 9:11 that morning. And I got to like walk in and be with her and pray. I mean, she was like in and out of consciousness, but I know she waited for me, and let me have that experience to be with her and to really hold her hand. I mean, I remember my dad was was going to head out to go to the barber, like to get a haircut, and after I washed her, I bathed my mom's body, which I didn't know, I didn't know she was going to die an hour and a half later or something. I bathed her with the nurse that was there, and then I noticed how her breathing shifted. And I'm a nurse and I've worked in palliative care. Not have I haven't worked with people in active dying very much, but with active birthing for a long time. But her breathing shifted, and I was like, I think this is it. And my dad and my sister and I got to be there with her, and it was a massive gift. And yeah, so that was very significant. And as you and I have spoken about in the past, right, that I don't know what I would have done had my mother died before I had gotten out. Had I not been able to be there and share in the experience with my siblings, with my father, with our family, and then process it through, and it would have been devastating. It would have been another big loss. So I'm grateful to God that God helped it be so bad. you know, um, and also that that my family and the people close to me were like, it went both ways, right? Because some members of my family were like, great, now you're out, move on, right? And then other people had some more ability to sort of understand or feel that I'd come out of something traumatic and that there was an immense amount of loss. But I think it was always very challenging for people. And I think it continues to be, right? Because I never showed the signs.
Yeah.
I didn't look haggard. Although when I look at myself, there's certain pictures I see of myself in the last couple of years. I look horrible. I was smiling, but
Right.
I look like I am dying.
Yeah.
And but they didn't see that too, because they weren't seeing me. They weren't seeing me, right? Um, anyway, so that was a very significant thing. And after she died, there was both this elation of immense love
Mm.
and immense loss. So I remember it's like there's actually a picture of me and my sister the night after, like, so she died in the morning and that evening, and we both have the biggest smiles because we were just at a birth, right? It was like a birth, it was a death, it was fun, it was beautiful. It's what I would wish for, to have some of the people in my life close to me, praying for me, loving me, like being
Touching
right there,
you,
walking me into like,
present.
yeah, being present with me. It was so holy. It was so holy.
Yeah.
And then it was like, holy shit, my mom is dead.
Yeah.
Like, my mom is dead.
Shocking.
Yeah. And it's like, all those years are not coming back.
Yeah.
That's it. So that, and, also I was still in order mind. Right? I was like, okay. And then I started a meditation class. I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach. I was like, how am I going to find my people?
Yeah.
You know? And then I started a meditation class, and that was actually going really well. It was like, people were coming to my apartment, which was really great. And I was teaching meditation, and met a few friends, a couple of friends that I still have.
Yeah.
And then I also met somebody who would become a partner to me for almost a year,
Yeah.
but who would have a really significant role in healing parts of what had been so hurt, and also the loss of him later. Like, he was almost like a band-aid,
Yeah.
because it was so exhilarating to fall in love after having had this experience, right? And being so dry in the area of like love and affection in partnership for so many years, that
Yeah.
I had so desired. So to have that delicious intimacy and excitement was just wonderful, and really boosted my spirit and my heart and my body, like woke me back up in all these ways that I was like, yeah, there I am. That's parts of me. Those are parts of me that are just as holy as all these other parts of me. And he was such a gift in that he had a real spiritual depth and desire. And so he could really roll with like my intensity. And then also, because I came from this training that was like very strict, I did a lot of suffocating, of the relationship and of him and of myself. Um and so, that lasted, I don't know, almost a year, like 9 months, I don't know, something like that. But when that ended, it ended actually right around the 1 year anniversary of my mom's death. And that was, and you were part of I mean, you've been part of my life all my life, but, that was an immense spiral down. And it was a culmination of a lot of things, because I didn't have community yet,
Yeah.
and he became my kind of community. And so when that ended, I really then, feeling the depth of loss of that relationship and that connection and friendship, but then also it highlighted all the other loss.
Oh.
And as I mean, I was definitely suicidal.
Yeah.
Meaning I really wanted out. I wanted, um, of course, I wanted the pain. I didn't know what to do with the pain, right? And I didn't know how to manage the pain of the loss. And it took a lot of grace and counseling and blessings. I worked with a dear friend who's a spiritual counselor for a year. He met with me every week, and he's in Australia. And he was like, I'm showing up for you, sister. I am showing up. I'm going to show up for you every week. And that was amazing, to have somebody who was like, I love you. I see what you've gone through. And that also could be spiritual with me, right? That it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to talk about it, or we're going to do these processes, but that it was like, we're going to pray and we're going to connect to God, and we're going to, and that's where that's what resonates for me. Right.
Yeah.
So that journey took took a few years of really deeply and sad years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lonely, deep years.
Yeah.
And then this sort of, which kind of might sound funny to people, but it's why I love haiku so much, right? Is like I'm a writer, and I remember the moment I had this insight, because I used to write haiku in my 20s a lot. I mean, I wrote it all my life, but it was like in my 20s with this one dear friend of mine. And we used to exchange haiku twice a week. And I had this thought that I was like, I am going to allow myself to write anything as long as it's in the form of a haiku. And there was something about the structure of the 575 syllables, and that just something, it was like a hug.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even know. It just energetically just felt like a holding.
Yeah.
And that was like, I almost felt like this newborn at that time. I was so raw and in pain, like a newborn that somebody just dropped in the middle of a room without a swaddle, and they just left the room.
Yeah.
I just felt like a raw nerve.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I am going to write. I'll let myself write anything, even how much I want to die.
Yeah.
As long as it's in a haiku. And so I started doing that, and I started sharing them. And then I started putting them up. I don't actually remember what the thing was that made, it was because I had a haiku that came through that was said, I want to be it's actually hanging in my living room. That is, it was like a haiku that told me that it wanted to be on a wall.
Love it.
And I was like, okay, so do I have to do graffiti? What do I have to do to get on a wall? Who's going to let me write haiku on a wall? And then I realized I could just write it on a little piece of paper and tape it to a wall. That thought. So I started doing that. And that connected me. And it was this moment also where I had decided to live, right? Like, so I had decided to live. I had said, like, each day I was allowing myself to, I was giving myself a room. Am I going to live? Am I going to die? And when I decided that I was going to live, and this haiku, like, connection, I decided that, yeah, I would go out, and every day I would put haiku on a wall, and I would share it. And then, that was the birth of like my, bison butterfly, which has a whole other story. And also is, that my art, that I then started burning haiku into leather goods that I started making. And I just started teaching myself, and took a class, and that became a whole thing, until I got pregnant. And then it was like a little bit, it was, just things take time. And
just
one
so
day
people know, because I always felt impressed by you bringing yourself kind of into the world in this new way, this sort of rebirth, that when you say you were putting it on the wall, you were literally going around Portland with your haiku, and it was being plastered everywhere, and then kind of and you had your bison butterfly tag on there.
Yeah.
So it was actually becoming something that was taking shape out in the city, that other graffiti artists and people, street artists, were picking up on it and
That's
started to
right.
connect you into this community.
Totally. Yeah. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
That was amazing. And it continues to be. I mean, now nobody's getting together, but because of COVID, but yeah, those connections were a lifeline for me.
Yeah.
And to claim my artistry in this way, I started like reading at poetry slam type things, and then Grief Rites, like, I went to Grief Rites, met my dear friend who is now my co-founder, Melissa, and we decided to join forces and move it forward. And but yeah, what I did, it was like I took the grief and the loss and I like went inside out. It was all inside of me, eating me alive and killing me and telling me I was lonely and I was in. And I went like, I'm putting it on a wall. Like you said, like, yeah, I was literally, I mean, the look was like this art paper, this white paper with gold duct tape on all four corners. So that was just simple with just my handwriting in black. And yeah, it's really powerful and beautiful. And now I have a collection that I'm looking for a publisher on my haiku collection. Because that's what they want. That's what the haiku want. This next phase. But yeah, so it was, was that commitment to going like, I'm going to commit to going out to things. I'm going to commit to being really uncomfortable. I mean, it was, I was going to things all by myself
Yeah.
without knowing people. And I was depressed. I was sad,
Yeah.
and you know, it was hard. It was really hard.
Yeah.
And I had to make myself do it because I knew I would die otherwise.
Yep.
It really it really got down to that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because, yeah.
So will you actually tell us a little bit more about grief rites, and maybe even we can go into what has kind of come of that, and then we can backtrack again.
Yeah. Well, Grief Rites is so Grief Rites was started by my dear friend Melissa at the same time that she was creating Grief Rites, which is well, now it's a nonprofit. It's called the Grief Rites Foundation. And it is a way that we use art as agency to express grief. And so both of us are writers. And so what we created, it was these curated readings once a month. So we used to have, meaning curated, meaning we would have the readers, it wasn't an open mic.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we had readers of all, like, people who've never told their story before, who've never gotten up and said anything, who've never written a word, to New York Times bestsellers. Just it was a very wide and even field, right? Because
Beautiful.
grief, everybody's got it and everybody knows it. And so, yeah, we joined forces, and while she was creating that, I was creating a grief ritual that I called Grief and the Art of Living. And it was a workshop that I launched the weekend of my mother's second year death day. And she my mom my mom wasn't there, but she was there. That's hilarious. So anyway, so I launched it that weekend. So Melissa and I just met, and we were like, oh, we really are appreciating what each other is doing. How might we join forces? So we joined forces in that we went in together for Grief Rites, and I kept doing my workshops. And yeah, over the course of many years, I mean, our last in-person reading was last February. So February of 2020. And it was huge. It was at Powell's Books downtown, which is like a huge event. And we were hosted, and it was standing room only. And it was, it was always amazing. Sometimes we had 20 people. Sometimes we had 120 people. But it was always the same amazing vibe, right? And so anyway, in the course of the last 5 years, doing these grief workshops, experiencing my own grief of varying degrees, working with grief rites, I have felt like I wanted to create more in terms of like online courses. And this was before COVID that I felt this inspiration. But it's been a busy few years, right? I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and I'm a solo parent and I work as a nurse and blah, blah, blah. So, it's been a lot of things in the oven all at once. And so this now, what I've called the grief revolution, is my most recent baby that I'm about to birth. And the grief revolution for is a place where people have a voice. In grief rites, one of the things I always would talk about is that we not only talk about speaking your grief, but we put a mic to it, right? We want to amplify your grief because grief deserves an amplification because it is suffocated in our culture. It is suffocated. And we are not taught because we don't know, because we've just got this like tight thing going on around our throats and our necks and our chests and our heart, right? And so I would always, when we would do our intros and stuff, I'd always talk about that. I'm like, we put a mic to it. We're going to amplify your voice so that everybody can hear it, Like everybody's like, for the people in the back, right? It's like, we want everybody to hear it. And why? Because we all have it and it connects us so deeply, right? So over the course of the last many years, I have really wanted to offer like courses and kind of ways to integrate grief, because for me, I don't use the word healing around grief because I don't think anyone is sick. Like when we feel grief, it's because we're healthy. It's because we love. I was talking to you the other day about like, I say like grief is a love compass. Yeah. Grief is actually pointing us exactly where we love the most. But which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to avoid it. Because we feel all this grief and then we push it away, but then it keeps coming at us and then we push it away. And it's like grief is going like, hey, sister, I'm not going anywhere. And actually, I'm just going to get uglier because you seem to really need a like uglier. But so I have really, over the course of the past several years, like worked on what I call integrating grief. Yeah. That it's just like when you have a relationship, right? That you're like, that person, this new person who you love, they don't just come into your life and now they are like part of everything and everyone in your life and everybody knows them. It takes time, right? It's like first you're experiencing them. Then you introduce them to your, closest people, maybe. Then they start, then you do some stuff publicly. Like it's this process. Yeah. And that's what this is like. It's building a relationship with this part of us that's always been there because we have had grief since we were born. And it's really good. It's good to feel it and experience it because where we grieve and how we can expand to allow ourselves to grieve is how the same muscle that we use to love, right? So it's like we can't just do one. And I think that for so long, and me personally, I felt shame about how much grief I felt. And I also related to the orders. It was shame because I felt like I did this to me. Yeah. I took myself out of the love of my family. I took myself out of the life that I knew that I wanted to have. And at the same time, it was like, yes, I did that. And I was immensely controlled and, used and all of those things. And so it's been this journey, right, Jen, of like how to be me now and what I didn't think this through, right? You know what I mean? Like I didn't think like, oh, I'm having a lot of grief. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like life, right? It's an organic process. Yeah. And I remember even now, I'm launching on March 22nd, I'm launching what is called a beta course, which is a mini version of my longer integrating grief. And it's called Reconnecting with Yourself After a Major Loss. And people are going to learn how to find where grief lives in their body and how to connect with that place in that little mini course in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited.
Me too.
Because I've learned so much. And I think like part of what made my journey hard is that I was trying to avoid the grief, or I was listening to the people who were like, why are you sad about it? They did this, and this to you. Or why, people that couldn't understand, I listened to them. Or I even remember like one of my close family members saying to me, you're so intelligent. Why would you need to talk to somebody about all of this? Like, you have to just let it go.
Yeah.
And you're going, it's like listening to that is so invalidating, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like in one way I was like kicking and screaming like, no, this is real. And it's not just real because I'm feeling it, but because it's like my blood. You can't go get rid of my red blood cells, but keep the white blood cell. It's like, no. It's all there. It's all oxygen,
Yeah.
So yeah. So now I'm in the midst of approaching this date of launching this, and the tech stuff is kicking my ass. So I'm getting a tutor, a tech tutor, which I wish I would have realized I could have done like 7 months ago, but now I'm 2 weeks from launching and I'm like, is there anybody that could walk me, like hand hold me? Yes, there is. Anyway, so I'm just, I don't know.
And let me say, so may I ask, with the beta, is that, does it cost people?
Thank you for asking. So the beta course is actually free of charge. It's no cost for testimonial and feedback. So my goal is to get people's testimonials and feedback, and then be able to mold the paid course to really serve people's needs, right? Because I have had a lot of experience working with people in this field now for the last 5 years, not to mention prior to that, right? That I was a midwife working in life and death. I was a palliative care nurse for over 11 years, working with people in the dying. I was a minister like I've had a lot of experience, but then officially sort of grief coaching and counseling kind of thing over the last 5 years. I really want to get people's feedback. I want to know what they would love. I want to know how what I'm teaching them lands for them in this format, which is going to be online. I've done all my workshops in person. Right. So this is the first time that I'm creating something, kind of putting these nuts and bolts down, and that, and that's going to evolve over time. Right. But I want to sort of start as strong as possible.
Yes. So this is a new format for you. You're looking for a crew of people to come on board and participate in it for free, with feedback and testimonials that they'll give you, so that you can really create something that is ideal for people in this experience.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that a lot of those people are going to want to join and work with me and keep going with me, right? Like, I want this to be something that is what I'm doing. And I'm hoping for like a crew. When you say a crew, I'm hoping for like 500 to 1,000 people to want to do this with me. Like, big numbers, so that it can touch a lot of people. It's the grief revolution. And that takes, come on, right? Yeah.
And I'm so excited. I know for all the listeners out there that you can feel Madi's heart. But I feel personally really so connected with you in this work, and with the grief that we've shared together and journeyed with, witnessing one another together. And so I know you in this way, and I'm really so happy that you're already in this field. And I'm so looking forward to all the amazingness to come around, your service in this way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I feel really privileged. Yeah, my heart, the need is so big.
Yeah.
The need is so big. And we have a responsibility, right? To fill the needs that we know we can.
Yeah. 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 So thank you for sharing all of that. I do want to make sure that we also just get to one other amazing element of your life,
What's that?
our little nugget.
Oh, my daughter.
My
Yeah, I'm like,
goddaughter.
your goddaughter. That's right. Oh,
Just so that
yeah,
we can
my
share with
kiddo.
people kind of, I think it's so important for these families and for others who are listening,
Mm,
who are, especially those who are recently kind of out of these experiences.
yeah,
They get to hear where we're at now, and the
yeah,
beautiful
yeah,
things that happen in the life hereafter.
yeah,
Cult.
yeah. Thank you for saying that. I will share about her, and then I there's something that just came to mind that I want to say. Actually, can I say that first before I talk about her? Is a year after I left. No, anyway, within a year-ish of after I left, I went back to Oakland.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to say this because since the release of our first episode, we've heard from a bunch of people, right? And I've heard from several different people who were former students, former, just people we knew along the way.
Yeah.
And the biggest gift that I have received, and so I went back to Oakland. Sorry that I bounced around. I went back to Oakland to apologize to anybody who would meet with me because I really wanted them to know that I was really sorry
Yeah.
that we had up and left, that I had basically convinced them that it was a good idea, that I was convinced. I mean, I wasn't, right? I knew it was wrong, but I was, I didn't know how to change it at that moment. But the point is that I went back and just about everybody met with me.
Mm.
And not only met with me, but like, one of my former students, I stayed with her. And I was so sad at that time. I was so sad. I mean, I was in the middle of in the middle of that breakup with that relationship. And I was so sad. And it was like the spiral was beginning to happen, but I knew I had to connect with these people that I loved. And
And can I ask you, just for clarification for all of us, now the people that you were connecting with were people that were still living in the city
Mhm.
where you were running the center?
That's
And
right.
were they still connected into the orders, that the two that had divided, or these were people?
No,
Okay.
no, no, because pretty much 90 or more percent of the people who had been there had gone with Peter's order.
Yeah.
So they were like, it was like different cities kind of took on, went on picked a side, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that. So no, they were pretty, I don't think there were other folks from the other order, from Claire's order. But I just wanted to say something about that because I was so touched, this thing that Peter used against me to say that I didn't really love people, that I actually was just doing it for myself, that I was actually being so selfish. And then, but people felt my love because I did actually really love them. And I want to say this because, God, if there's just people who are out there who are like us who left, who it's like got stripped down, to like nothing, to go like, not only are you, you're like abusing people in this way, that you're pretending to love them, but you're really manipulating them. And I was like, but I did love them, but I do love them. And then everybody's telling you how they don't, it's so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that gift has been something that, just the other day I talked with somebody also who I'd been with, right? Who I had apologized to, and who said to me how my apology really shook them and made them have to it like shook them and had to and worked on them of what I was apologizing for. So I just wanted to say that. I don't know if I'm expressing it as much as I feel it, or that we've talked
Yeah.
about in the past.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like also you were struck that the messages that had been slammed on you, especially as you were leaving, around how selfish you were, to then have the breathing room, have kind of a year go by, touch base with these people again,
Yeah.
and feel how they received your love, and then you getting to receive their care
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah.
was part of this process, and
Yeah.
kind of an awakening, I'd imagine, out of, like, I can see some of the layers just shedding of the stuff that was slapped on you around that messaging.
Yeah, it was just, there was another person also who very well, but that, like, their family just like took me in, like took me in and loved me and listened to my story and heard me cry, and that there wasn't this, there was always this hierarchy, right? Nobody could know my feelings.
Yeah.
Nobody could see me. And then here they were seeing me depressed, sad about losing my boyfriend, sad about losing my mom, just like a person.
Yeah.
And they were like, I love you. And
Yeah.
I'm going like, I love you too. Like, oh, it's really, that's beautiful. That's where we're at, because that's where we were,
Yeah.
even though, so anyway.
Yeah.
And it's not all roses, right? Like there's people who are angry. There's people who that was hard for. Yeah, all the things, of course.
Right.
But I
Right.
think that what I would say to somebody who has left the orders or anything is to find that thing, that core thing that was, taken away or was threatened, that core belief about yourself, and find it and claim it back
Yeah.
and build that thing.
Yeah.
Because that's like a part of your humanity, right? It's like a part of your soul's journey here, like your soul's purpose here.
Yeah.
And those people who have said those things to me have really have been part of that for me.
Yeah. The reframing.
Bring me back my love. Yeah, my love in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Reminding me.
Yeah.
And giving me that gift, right? Peter said all those things. It's like Peter saying, I'm taking away your priesthood. How can you take away something that was given to me by God?
Yeah.
You can't actually.
Yeah.
It's not yours.
Right.
So anyway, and so one of the things that they did take away was my having a family, right? Like in the years that I wanted to have a family, when I was in my, late 20s, early 30s, and that option was taken away. And yeah, so, it, like I shared the last time, it was one of my first thoughts.
Yeah.
As I was driving from
In the
Chicago.
car.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm going to have my family now.
Yeah.
And then a lot of journeys that were a lot of roadblocks, right, to that. In one part, I really wanted to have a family with a partner, with a husband.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be met. Like I wanted to do it that way. But I was getting older, right? I was like 43 when I left, and then I was 40, I kept,
Yeah.
and I think that's also one of the reasons I was super attached to that one relationship, because I was like, awesome, here you are, let's do it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, things take time, right? Things take time. You have to let a plant grow before it bears fruit. And I just wasn't good at that yet. Right. Not, I don't know that I am now, um, but, anyway, so yeah, so the journey, when I decided to have my daughter, to attempt pregnancy, it was after, considering adoption, looking into all these different things, and decided to, I call it my Hail Mary pass. I was 47.
Yeah. So
I was 40, it
awesome.
was 47. Yeah. And I feel like the combination of medicine and miracle
Yeah.
is how I see it, the rightness that motherhood in this way of bearing a child and raising a child and being their mother was meant for me, like was part of my DNA, like my spiritual DNA, my soul DNA, not just this family life, right? And also just a gift. I felt like it's a gift from God
Yeah.
because because so I attempted pregnancy and became pregnant and gave birth right after I turned 48. And my daughter's 2.5 now. And I don't know what should I say? What else? There's so much to say, but
I know.
that's like a different podcast. It's like a
It is.
podcast
It
about
is.
being like single parenting or solo parenting or you know birthing in your later in life.
Well, we can leave it that you're
Yeah.
living a very exciting life.
Yeah, I've got like a very full, that I have a very full, beautiful life. I have incredible community. I through a lot of grace and love, I several friends who we were friends before we happened to get pregnant around the same time, not sort of communicating about any of it. And now our children are besties and connected and all the same age. Like we have this little like batch of puppies that are all like raised, we're raising them, and that's really amazing. And that my daughter has, one of her, aunties that lives here in town, and also just all these aunties and mamas and papas. And that's like community is so core to my soul. And and I definitely have a beautiful community of people, close to us, and also people like you, right? I mean, people that know us and love us outside of that. And and our family isn't complete, right? But our family is beautiful. I mean, it's full, right? And we look forward to what's coming.
Yeah.
Um
So
yeah.
much goodness to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the final question that I have for you, unless there's something else you'd like to share, is just if there's anything that you wish that you could say to those who are still in the organization that we were a part of.
Mhm. That will be here when you get out.
Yes.
We'll be here when you leave, and we're
And that
here.
and that we'll be here in an open space to be what you need for us
Mm.
to be. Because sometimes that's saying nothing, and sometimes it's saying things, and sometimes it's, face to face, and sometimes it's a phone call and whatever it needs to be.
Yeah, but that I understand. I
Yeah.
understand. And yeah, just that I'll be here. We'll be here. And we're here now. We're here now holding the thread
Yeah.
on this other side of the experience, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Madi. Again, it is such a pleasure, and you're such a gift. And I'm so glad to be a part of your life and a
Oh,
part of the creation to come.
thank you, sister. I love you so much. And I'm so glad that you took the leap of faith and massive action and created this podcast to create a forum for us to get to talk our stories and for families and individuals to hear this. And who knows who might be like sneaking a listen, right? No, for real, right? Who might be listening inside the orders or inside any kind of group or inside a dysfunctional like partnership that's abusive or coercive? Like who's listening, right? And that we're like, we love you. We see you. We're here. And I'm really grateful that you have totally put a mic to it.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm here
Yeah.
with you, and we are here for you all.
Mhm.
And thank you.
Love you. Thank you so much.
In this episode, you heard Madi speak about both her internal process and life after leaving the Ruach community. She speaks to the disorientation of not even having the stuff that one typically has to live, such as a home, a bed, a plate to eat off of. And while she had wonderful familial support, she raises awareness to a state that many people who leave such groups do face: the loss of all they have known, entry into a world unknown, and often very large areas of life where one finds themselves basically starting over. For example, many people have to find new jobs as they leave that life behind and realize their work choices were influenced by the group mind or directives of the leader or the lifestyle of that community. Many people are leaving living situations that were communal or with family that they are leaving behind in the group. And so they leave essentially homeless. Having these additional life adjustments going on during the time that one leaves a group of high control or undue influence is extremely disorienting, as you can imagine, and puts an additional demand on the individual. So, for those of you listening who might be in a position to support your loved one with these basics, this help honestly could be critical to their survival. So I wanted to just mention that. But Madi also shares about her journey of emotionally leaving beyond the physical leaving to what building a new life looked like, with creativity, community, and a commitment to integrating grief. So I want to comment on one last thing that Madi's story brought to mind for me. In both episodes, we referred to the experience she had of being told by Peter, the Ruach Center leader, that she had been selfish, thinking more of herself than her students. And the reality here was that Madi and all other priests had truly devoted their entire lives to service of those who were attending their centers and even beyond that. Just to give you all a little further insight into some of the standard practices within this group, all priests tithed 10% of their gross income. They paid for larger homes so that they could run a center out of their house. They also typically paid for flights to retreats where they taught, and had to pay for the retreat itself just as an attendee would. And they were required to attend a minimum of 3 a year, and more typically anywhere from 3 to 6 retreats a year. So financially, priests gave a lot. In addition to this, they typically were serving their communities every single morning and 2 nights a week, if not more, alongside Sunday services and a long weekend each month. In addition to this, they also had students they would meet with once a week and be responsible for reading all the journal entries, exercises, etc. that the students were submitting to them. And I share this with you all simply to express the minimum required of someone in this role and to perhaps highlight how twisted things get when someone in power tries to play on a doubt or perceived weakness that you may have of yourself, so much so that it's possible to actually get someone to believe something about themselves that is actually not true. Since this arose in Mari's stories, I thought it might be helpful to hear a little from the perspective of those who work specifically with this population of people who have left such groups. So the following core concepts I'm addressing here are taken from a book called Cult Recovery, A Clinician's Guide to Working with Former Members and Families. And this commentary is not a direct reference to Mari's situation necessarily, but rather just some principles to understand within these cultic dynamics. So we know, based on research around group dynamics, that once one joins an unhealthy group, over time, one unconsciously needs to find adaptive solutions to fit in and to demonstrate that they're loyal members. As a result, there's an attempt to conform to environmental pressures, and members will unconsciously suppress their critical thinking skills, personal desires, and basically aspects of their original characters because idiosyncratic traits or wishes are seen as problematic if they don't support the cult leader's goals. So Jana Lalick, who some of you may be familiar with, adds to the understanding of cult reshaping by describing how resocialization in the cult is a two-person process. Responding to the demands of the cult leader requires repeated acts of self-renunciation on the part of those following. So to resolve uncomfortable feelings that conflict with the cult, which the cult relabels as selfish or evil, members come to believe that self-renunciation is the answer, and they can even experience self-denial as a personal relief. So what is actually an adaptive strategy can result in a temporary personality change because it is the member's attempt to end conflict and defend against the cult-induced negative self-image. So those messages that one is selfish or evil, essentially. So if you are in some connection or no connection at all, but that you have a loved one in a situation like this, please don't forget that a seemingly dramatic shift in personality along with behavior is most often a result of the pressure and need to conform. So with good support, and especially with help from a professional who understands dynamics around coercive control, healing and reclaiming one's lost or submerged parts are all elements of that journey of returning to oneself. And this process may look a little different for those who were born and raised in such groups, but the journey to autonomy and recreating oneself into fulfillment and joy is totally possible. I hope you've found this episode helpful, and thanks so much to Mari for openly sharing her journey with us. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Project Hope podcast. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe and comment. You can always get in touch with me at jennifer-french.com. And please let me know any specific topics of interest. And of course, I'm always interested in your stories, whether you've left an organization of high demand, high control, or if you're an individual struggling with the knowing that someone you love is in such a situation. I am here for you. Think critically, take heart, and be free.